A filter is a concept in many online communities for an aspect of a work of art that makes people who are considered undesirable by the community avoid the work entirely. In the same way a casual player might drop a game that proves too difficult for them, lewd fan service in all forms of Eastern entertainment have a tendency to scare people away, usually out of a fear of embarrassment of being caught with something so immodest or sexist. Such a filter is even stronger when the fan service would be considered taboo, such as when depicting underage characters or incest. And so, here I am filtering my own audience against my better judgment by praising one of the more notorious incestuous underage brother-sister romances to come out of Japan. Oreimo by author Tsukasa Fushimi, also known by the full name Oreimo Imouto ga Konna ni Kawaii Wake or My Little Sister Can't Be This Cute, filters people by its very premise, which is an element that unironically makes the story a lot stronger for reasons I'll make clear in this video. If you somehow got even this far into the video and still decide to turn it off, then the filter has successfully done its job and you would show you have no desire to understand a world that might at first seem strange to you. And then you won't know why a story like this would drive me to tank what little credibility I have as a YouTuber before my channel even takes off. This is a light analysis of the first volume of the Oreimo light novel. So that everyone's on the same page, even though most of you watching may have no experience with the story at all or have only watched the anime, I'll first go through the major beats of the plot that I may reference back to them in my analysis. Some of you might notice that I've already made this video before, while the rest of you might notice the lengthy gap in my uploads. Turns out I was naive enough to think I could get away with using footage and audio from the anime, which led to a video I could only upload to Rumble where there really isn't a built-in audience. And then there's the computer issues. As a result, I've chosen to remake this video with less of a focus on visuals, but I hope it will still be engaging enough that my on-screen gags and notes don't go unnoticed. Please let me know in the comments so I know I'm not wasting my time in editing. I've also taken the liberty to redraft the script so the first 2/3 are less of a beat-by-beat plot summary, even if I can only do so much when that's the structure I decided on and much of the analysis requires more of the full picture. There is no official translation, so I'm relying on the fan translations I could get my hands on, and as one translator stopped halfway through, the writing style will change over time. Something they both have in common, however, are the very helpful translator's notes that I will practically regard as part of the main text. That's because of how helpful they are in deciphering aspects of Japanese culture that might be unknown to Westerners, and for this story that's kind of a big deal. The story starts with our POV character Kyosuke returning home from school and walking past his little sister Kiruno in the living room as he grabs a drink. She doesn't even glance in his direction when he greets her, as she's on the phone with a friend, smiling in a way Kyosuke thinks will never be directed towards him. She is described as perfect in practically every way, which makes it seem like she lives in a whole different world from someone like Kyosuke. He, by contrast, strives to be as mundane and average as possible, avoiding all risks he can. The two of them haven't gotten along for as long as he can remember. It is a fairly common trope for the POV character of these kinds of stories to be rather mundane so that the reader has an easier time empathizing with them, but also because it gives them plenty of room to grow. What already makes Kyosuke stand out is that he doesn't just happen to be normal, but he rather strives to be normal. He wants okay grades so he can get into a relatively good college so that he can get a stress-free job. That is as far as his ambitions go. He describes himself as not being part of any clubs or having any hobbies, but to illustrate the point we see how most of this introductory segment is just him motivated by wanting to procrastinate studying. After lazing about in his room for a bit, he heads downstairs and bumps into Kiruno in the hallway, making her drop all her stuff. She swats away his hand when he's just trying to help her, but gathers her things and leaves while Kyosuke questions the limits of her hatred for him. There's a vague sense in him that the relationship wasn't always like this. There's a brief section explaining that the stairs come down just by the entrance to the living room, creating a blind spot. So bumping into each other in the hallway like this is something that happens fairly often, which will eventually come up again. Rather than skipping straight to the next plot beat, Fushimi makes an effort to show Kyosuke lazing about and ignoring the voice in his head telling him he needs to study, again illustrating more clearly that he's entirely apathetic and just drifting on currents with no goals or interest of his own. When he finally gets up, he walks through the entryway where he bumped into Kiruno and finds a totally unrelated DVD case for a magical girl anime called Stardust Witch Meruru behind the shoebox. The light novel makes sure to describe how strange it is through the eyes of a normie. It features what looks like an elementary school-aged girl with pink hair and eyes and a huge mechanical staffs wearing, quote, a swimsuit made of bandages or something, which he finds very inappropriate. After his mom nearly catches him and makes it very clear how low she thinks of him, Kyosuke retreats to his room to investigate the DVD further. He finds that it actually contains the disc for an eroge named Loving My Little Sister. Unable to imagine it could belong to anyone in the household, he hatches a plan. During dinner, he brings up Stardust Witch Meru, saying a friend recommended it to see if anyone reacts. His father dislikes it because otaku stuff is a bad influence he should avoid. His mother didn't even react, so she probably agrees with the dad. But Kirino froze up and then excused herself from the table, and she seemed angry. Since she took the bait, Kyosuke pretends to head to the store but sneaks back in to catch his little sister ransacking his room to find the DVD. She denies everything and says she knows nothing about it despite trying to take the DVD from him. Once she's cornered, her brother takes pity on her and returns it, since it's clearly important to her. She still refuses, so he asks her to do him a favor and just throw it away, since it's clearly not hers and not his either, allowing her an escape path to keep her pride intact. She takes the DVD and leaves, briefly stopping to ask if it would be strange if she owned stuff like that. Kyosuke just wants her to leave, so he replies it's not strange and that he wouldn't make fun of her hobbies no matter what they are. 2 days later, after no further interaction, Kyosuke is slapped awake in the middle of the night and dragged into Kirino's room for life advice. She reveals her entire colossal hidden collection of Meru merch and Lil Sister eroge. She shows him all of this so that she can ask again if her hobby is strange. No one else knows her secret, so she has no choice but to confide in the brother she hates. Kyosuke is shocked at the revelation, while Kirino simply gushes over her collection, happily yapping in a way that only an enthusiast could. She could afford all of this by working as a magazine model, which Kyosuke was unaware of, showing just how estranged the two of them are. Still, she doesn't trust him fully, so there are some parts of her collection she won't let him see yet. Kyosuke can't hide his shock, both of the entire collection and that there's more. Kirino's confidence falters immediately, worrying that her hobby is too strange, but he reassures her that he's just surprised. He asks what both he and the reader has been thinking this entire time. Why only Little Sister eroge? She, of course, answers in the most easily misunderstood way ever, by crawling towards him on all fours while his back is against the wall and never breaking eye contact, while Kyosuke's inner monologue is screaming that he's not into this kind of stuff. All just to shove an eroge case in his face and ask if he thinks it's cute. Yeah, that's why she likes them, because little sisters are cute. True and real. Based Kirino. Again, he asks why. She claims she doesn't really know herself, but she's extremely embarrassed to answer, so maybe there's more to it. Her mannerisms change completely as she tries to explain, even speaking with cutesy sentence endings that just don't translate into English. She used to tell herself it's not normal and try to stop, but she never could. She knows what people would think if they found out, so with teary eyes she asks her big brother what she should do. He wants to say that he doesn't know, but he can't bring himself to let his sister down, no matter how much he tells himself that he wants nothing to do with this. Instead, he tells her she can come to him with help about her hobby and he'll do what he can to keep her secret. He then once more asks what's on every reader's mind, if she might be self-inserting as the sisters and if she really just has a thing for older brothers. But she kicks him out of the room and calls him disgusting for being unable to separate fiction from reality. I mean, she's right, but it's kinda strange to hear that from her considering where this story eventually goes. Next chapter, and a week later, Kyosuke is walking back from school with his bespectacled childhood friend Manami, who is as plain and mundane as he is. She's described as a supporting actress as normal, common, and mediocre. Her grades are just below the top of the class, so while she is an honor student, she's not some kind of genius. She's also not part of any clubs, but has housewife hobbies like cooking and sewing. While normal, she's clearly less apathetic than Kyosuke and does seem to have some direction in life. She has interests and the discipline to study at the very least. Still, she's the polar opposite of Kirino. She insists normal is good, matching Kyosuke's view of himself, and because of how normal she is, he's able to relax around her. She even blushes when called normal, like Kyosuke had given her a great compliment. She obviously has a crush on him, which he doesn't reciprocate, but he does have a soft spot for her. Manami offers to help him study a bit, as Kyosuke is unmotivated and easily gets distracted, giving the feeling that she has to take care of him a lot. He intends to get into the same college as her so that things can stay the same forever, but also makes it clear he sees Manami more as a doting grandma than a potential wife. They spot Kirino with some friends on the way back, and Manami doesn't recognize her. She is, however, jealous of how fashionable and pretty the girls are, saying she needs to try harder, but Kyosuke says she's fine the way she is. A few days later, more life advice. Kirino wants to play little sister area with her big brother. At first, she interprets Kyosuke's hesitation as judging her, even though he said he wouldn't. But she's eventually convinced it's awkward for him to play it next to his sister, and that it's a big step for a normie like him. So he borrows the game as homework. He doesn't even have his own computer, so he borrows her laptop too. The next day, when she's upset he hasn't played it yet, he makes up an excuse that it's because he doesn't understand how. So she boots up the all-ages version and explains in detail how those versions tend to differ from the regular 18+ version, and that it's not just a question of whether there are error scenes or not. She continues to explain the game, how it works and how they're supposed to be played for both Kyosuke and the reader's sake. She calls it an adventure game, but for Westerners the term visual novel is more likely to explain the type of game it is. You read a lot of text, occasionally get dialogue choices with varying consequences, build up your affection points with the girls, and raise certain event flags in order to get through the many routes. For the rest of the volume, or really the entire series, Kyosuke will frequently think about events in the story in game terms like dialogue choices and affection level. It is also very important you enter your real name so that you can feel a stronger connection to the girls who are now calling out to you personally. Somehow, Kyosuke is upset that the main character, Kosaka Kyosuke, describes himself as an extremely commonplace high school student. But Kirino explains it's fairly common for the main character of these kinds of games to be very ordinary so that the player has an easier time empathizing with them. They also tend to be clumsy, so there's plenty of room to grow. Yeah, very clever, Tsukasa, we all see what you're doing. In the very first scene, Game Kyosuke wakes up to find his little sister Shiori, Kirino's favorite girl, sleeping in his futon. His options are to hug her close, to gently pull out of the futon to not wake her up, or to kick her out with no hesitation. Kyosuke chooses the latter and is immediately kicked out of the chair by Kirino with no hesitation. I think this is a neat moment that shows both the relationship and how they are similar to each other. Kyosuke kicked out Shiori from the bed because Kirino is the only experience he has with a little sister, and he decided he needed to set boundaries with his fictional sister and teach her not to walk all over him. It's exactly what he wishes he could do with Kirino, but in reality he's so pathetic he can't even give her his justification. Shiori nearly starts crying from being kicked, and Kyosuke shows a lack of self-reflection by calling the protagonist terrible. Kirino points out that it was he who chose to do that to her, and then starts feeling really bad for Shiori while completely ignoring that she just did to Kyosuke what he did to the fictional sister. Neither one of them really reflect on their actions much. And while Kyosuke may have some pent-up complexes motivating how he treats his game sisters, it's not impossible that the same can be said for Kirino. She's just as conflicted about him as he is about her, and there was an early line where Kyosuke thought they used to be closer than they are now. So perhaps her treatment of the sisters is in part a form of wish fulfillment too. At the very least, that's an idea we can draw from this, which may be worth holding on to as the story develops. After their session, when she eagerly asks what he thought, he realizes why she's making him play this. She has no one else to talk to about it. He tells her to make some friends who share her interests. She is evasive the entire time so as to not appear vulnerable before him, and ultimately tries to avoid his suggestion by saying she doesn't want her image ruined by her hobby. Japan looks down on otaku, and it's especially shameful that she likes little sister games, but at the same time she's also one of the trendy kids at school. She belongs to both sides of the issue, both the normal world where she's popular and excellent, and the secret shameful otaku world. If the truth came out, she'd have to give up one of those sides. His solution is for her to make friends without her classmates finding out. When she asks how, he just confidently replies, "Leave it to me," which puzzles her for some reason. He calls Grandma Manami for help and is surprised to hear her suggest an offkai, an offline meetup for people who usually only interact online. Kyosuke's unfamiliarity with PCs may seem a little bit strange for a Westerner today, but from what I can find, according to unsourced surveys unfortunately, in 2015, 30% of Japanese high schoolers use laptops and 16% use desktops, compared to around 98% combined for UK and US at the time. And that's in 2015, 7 years after this book came out, so computers and internet would definitely need to be explained to a normie like Kyosuke, and maybe even the reader. As for Manami, who by all rights should know even less, she vaguely understands PCs and the internet because she borrows her younger brother's computer and has helped him meet up with some people from an R&B community. That actually kinda comes up in the next volume. He's kind of embarrassing. When he explains the plan to Kirino, she's at first upset that he went to that plain-looking girl for help. When pressed, she replies she can't stand her because of how lovey-dovey she and Kyosuke tend to be, implying she's likely jealous enough to misinterpret the situation since Kyosuke never reciprocates. Also, in contrast, Manami doesn't even recognize Kirino and likely doesn't think about her at all. Kirino eventually agrees, but requires constant pushes from Kyosuke to sign up for a website, look for a girls-only otaku group, and send in an application. Kyosuke has never seen his sister like this before, getting scared and wanting to give up when she's unable to figure things out on her own. For reasons he won't really understand until like volume 3, seeing Kirino like this makes him happy. He's also relieved she won't need him anymore once she has otaku friends. Chapter 3 begins as Kirino is eventually accepted into a group called Otaku Girls Unite by the admin Sayori. The admin speaks like a posh lady and invites Kirino to a meetup that will luckily be held in only a few days. Kirino agrees to go, but only if her brother joins her in secret. The day of the meeting, they head to Akihabara and Kirino points out all the recognizable locations to Kyosuke and the reader. These books can practically be used as a tour guide for places to visit in Tokyo. They split up so Kyosuke can head to the location first, and he enters the Pretty Garden Cafe, which he is shocked to learn is a maid cafe. There's some comedy as he learns how these maid cafes work, which is of course also explained to the reader. Eventually, a group of girls enter, led by a 180 cm tall woman who dresses in the most stereotypical otaku outfit possible and speaks in an archaic fashion. She introduces herself as Sayori Bajina and says she has a reservation. Her name is occasionally translated as Vagina, which would be spelled the same way and would possibly explain why people think she's messing with them when she introduces herself, but I'm sticking to Vagina for reasons tied to a later volume. The girls start socializing with each other, but they all avoid Kirino. At school, her aura and highly fashionable outfit would help her make friends, but in this world she comes off as an outsider and everyone is wary of her. At the end of the meetup, everyone disperses and Kirino has failed to make a single friend. Kyosuke tries to cheer her up, but his pity is dismissed and met with harsh words. She turns her dejection into frustration and takes it out on her brother, who decides to be patient with her since he knows how much she's hurting. He can lie to himself all he wants, but he clearly cares about her. Then Sayori returns and asks Kirino to come with her to another meeting with just one other person. It's for people Sayori didn't get the chance to befriend. Kyosuke can come too. They head to McDonald's, or McDonald's for you anime onlys, to meet the last person, a gothic Lolita cosplayer who introduces herself by the username Kuroneko. Kyosuke realizes that Sayori just set this up for the people who couldn't make friends and thinks she's good at discreetly taking care of people. He would probably not have taken the effort to make them fit in, so he admires that she's a good person. The moment Sayori tells the other two girls to drop the formalities, Kuroneko and Kirino start picking on her for her name, looks and manners. Kyosuke stands up for her, but she really doesn't mind at all and seems to be happy that at least the girls are being open. After a brief introduction game, Kirino and Kuroneko start fighting each other over their radically different tastes in anime. Kirino can't stand Kuroneko's edgy brooding anime, while Kuroneko can't stand Kirino's cutesy magical girl anime. And since they share time slot, they argue which is more important. Except because they're both otaku, they don't argue about it in plain language that a normie can understand, but rather throw around terms like oshareke, yakigan, chunibyo and moe. Feel free to look them up if there's any you don't understand. The terms are varying degrees of importance to the subculture, but not so much for this story. Kyosuke doesn't immediately realize, but Sayori assures him that all of this arguing means they are becoming friends. He starts thinking to himself how he used to be very prejudiced towards otaku who are into the subculture of anime and games, but now finds that their hobby is no different from any other. They may be a bit weird, but are good people who seek each other out as an escape and to have fun. At the end of an afternoon together out in Akihabara, Kyosuke thanks Sayori and says she's a good person, while she claims she was just doing what she wanted. The next day after school, he's tired from going to Akihabara in the previous chapter. Not because of the event itself, but because for the 90-minute train ride home he had to listen to non-stop ranting and abuse from Kirino, mostly about how much she hates Kuroneko and how upset she is that Kyosuke dragged her out there. Worn out from that, he wants to go do something fun with Manami to recharge. He tells her to go all out and that he's paying, so she wants to visit the park. She's being cutesy again for the entire scene, but is ignored as usual. There, they spot Kirino modeling, which makes it sink in for Kyosuke how much he's been taking her lightly. Manami chimes in that her younger brother is in the same year as her but in a different school, and said that on a recent standardized test Kirino was in their top 5 score in the entire prefecture. So she both has a serious modeling gig and is remarkably excellent at her studies. Manami even says out loud what Kyosuke has thought to himself a few times before this volume. It's as if she lives in a completely different world from them. To emphasize it further, the next scene is Kyosuke coming home from school to his mother, happy how even the neighbors are praising how amazing Kirino is. She's doing so well in the track and field club that she'll be participating in a big tournament soon. While the mother has absolutely no positive words to say about her no-good son Kyosuke, she does note that Kirino has been more lively than usual lately and suspects there might be a boy she likes. A few days later, Kyosuke finally finishes the game he borrowed and returns it to Kirino, who asked what he thought. Trying to give the answer that would make Kirino happiest, he simply praises the last few scenes he played, saying the latter part of the Shiori route were really good. He describes how their parents found out about the relationship, so Shiori ran away from home. The main character chased after her and they watched the sunset together. She approves of this answer, content that Kyosuke seems to understand the appeal of the games after all, possibly boosted a little bit by the fact he was her favorite girl who made an impact on him. When she asks more questions, he changes topic to talk about her off-kai friends and how things are going with them. Kirino kept in touch and has another meeting planned with both of them. Before leaving, he curses her with foreshadowing by telling her not to carelessly drop her DVDs again. The very next scene, he returns home to find Kirino and their father in the living room after she carelessly dropped the DVD again and he found out about the Eruga disc inside.
This is the one thing we didn't want to happen.
The mother takes Kyosuke aside and assumes this was due to his influence, but unfortunately he doesn't even have a computer to play it on and has no place in his room to hide such a game. The mom even knows where he hides his porn, so if this was his, she would know. She's still on Kirino's side though, so she goes to buy some sake to calm the father down. After 20 minutes, the living room door flies open and Kirino storms out of the house, pushing past her brother. It has been mentioned several times in the novel that the father is exceptionally strict, placing heavy weight on promises and will never budge once he makes up his mind. All of that helps build towards the obvious and inevitable confrontation we have here that should not have any easy solutions. Kyosuke considers chasing after her, but unlike in the anime, he decides that he must first know exactly what went down. He knows Kirino had a meeting with her friends today, and as the mother had said, she'd been more lively, likely because of them. So she probably got careless. The father is vacuuming up after an ashtray had been thrown across the room, giving Kyosuke a chance to look at the evidence on the table. There's an open DVD case for Meruru with an Eruga disc still inside, as well as a campaign flyer to get a postcard signed by Meruru's voice actress Hoshino Kurara if you bring a Meruru DVD with you to buy the new release. So she was careless and excited after a day with her friends, grabbed the DVD when she came home to quickly go get it signed, and bumped into her father due to the blind spot on the bottom of the stairs. Perhaps a little bit coincidental, but Kirino being more careless lately combined with the established blind spot when coming down the stairs made this an inevitability given enough time. Kyosuke sits down on his father's request and they talk. The father is a police officer with years of experience of getting confessions out of criminals, so Kyosuke has no hope of getting away with a lie. He immediately confesses that he knew about it when asked. The father says he never bought these kinds of things for his children because it's a bad influence. News always talk of how games will rot your brain and how homicidal criminals always have suspicious manga in their homes. The otaku who engage in these things are hated by society, so nothing good can come from it. Kyosuke reflects that his own opinion of an otaku used to be very similar. The father can permit her other interest because they have an agreement that she will keep her grades up, and even that took time. He was against the modeling work and against all the money Kirino spends on makeup, clothes and handbags, but relented because the mother convinced him it was important to her. And ultimately, those things are harmless. The otaku world is a bad influence, so it's his duty to steer her back on the right track before she's completely lost. The father decides the conversation is over and moves upstairs to find and throw out Kirino's entire collection. He knows that if she's hiding this, then she definitely has more she's hiding. But Kyosuke puts himself in the way. Even though he can't justify it to himself, and despite the pain of his father twisting his wrist, he won't let his father do this. After some pleading, they come to an agreement. Kyosuke will speak to Kirino and convince her to throw everything out herself, and in return the father won't have to invade her privacy. But she is not allowed to keep even a single piece of her otaku hobby. Kyosuke suspects if he doesn't keep this promise, it's not unthinkable that his father would even kill him for it. Hyperbolic, but it shows the gravity of the situation. There is no way out. So Kyosuke goes looking for Kirino, and memories of similar scenes in the eroge flash in his head. But instead of a romantic scene, he finds Kirino abusing a drum set in an arcade game and muttering "die, die, die." They head to a Starbucks to talk, and he asks what she'll do next. Once more, with teary eyes, she asks her brother what she should do. Kyosuke starts by asking what happened. She says their father called her hobby worthless. The anime, games, her offline meeting, all of it. She breaks down in tears as she continues that she was unable to talk back, and in desperation of having what she loves trampled, she tried to hit him with the ashtray. Again, Kirino asks if she's weird for liking these things and if it's bad. This time, he responds that any parent would have reacted the same way. But now that the secret is out, she must choose whether to give up her hobby or not. If she can give it up, everything is resolved. It's the one blemish on her perfection. She of course understands that and has known from the start, but she can't. Both sides are her. If she got rid of one side, she wouldn't be herself anymore. Kyosuke curses internally for how stubborn she is, but finally responds that being an otaku is not a bad thing. He can hardly recognize himself compared to just a month ago, and a strange feeling wells up in him. He clicks his tongue and repeats "leave it to me" from earlier, almost as if he truly is her older brother. He told Kirino to wait for an hour while he fixes everything. He'd rather confront his father than crush his already broken little sister. No matter if they hate each other, he's still her brother, so he has to help her. That's just how it is. His mom gathered a few things he asked for, and his father's now somewhat drunk. Kyosuke still has to stand to the side of his father to work up the courage, hoping the father doesn't turn to face him. As expected, his father takes control of the conversation immediately. He begrudgingly agrees to hear Kyosuke out, but discipline will follow for breaking his word on talking to Kirino. First, Kyosuke explains how hard Kirino had worked to make friends since no one in her class shared her hobby. Kyosuke has seen the things she loves and met the people who feel the same. They're odd, so it makes sense people are prejudiced, but they're good people who have fun together, becoming friends immediately. He doesn't fully understand it himself, but it can't be bad if it helps them connect so strongly. He's surprised he has such a heated side to himself, far different from his normal laid-back attitude where everything is always someone else's problem and not his. Still, the father says it's a worthless hobby and a bad influence. Next, Kyosuke dumps out what his mom had gathered. Amazing grades, among the best in the prefecture, and numerous trophies and awards. The father dismisses the grades as part of their agreement. If her grades slipped, he would not let her continue modeling. Her trophies are unrelated and don't concern him. Kyosuke asks if it's really so wrong if she has a single strange hobby when she's so amazing and talented in every other aspect of her life. Because his pride and joy has one thing he can't tolerate, will he lecture her, make her cry, and force her to throw away what's important to her? When this doesn't work, Kyosuke has his final ace up his sleeve. He pulls out a photo album containing only pictures of Kirino, as well as a scrapbook with cutouts of every single magazine issue Kirino has modeled in. Despite saying he disapproves of her job, Kyosuke accuses his father of being happy with her choice. The father tries to explain he just had to keep an eye on her, so Kyosuke asks what he found out by looking into her modeling. If it was as bad as he thought, he would have put an end to it, not kept a scrapbook of her every picture. When the father finally concedes that point, saying it's not something she'd need to hide, Kyosuke shows a photo he printed at Starbucks. A photo of Sayori, Kuroneko and Kirino from the meeting today. He asks if that's something she should have to hide. All those photos are sides of Kirino. Only with all those sides is she Kirino. Without even one, she wouldn't be herself. He grabs his father's collar and threatens to strike him down if he still can't accept her hobby and insists on judging it when he knows nothing about it. The father concedes and takes back, saying it's worthless. However, he can't ignore the 18+ game in the hands of a 14-year-old girl. Kyosuke was ready for this too, but hesitates. Then he claims ownership of the eroge. If it's his, their father can't throw it out. Even his father knows he doesn't have a computer for it, so he admits he borrowed Kirino's PC. And then for the best quote of the book. You used your sister's computer in her room to play games in which you do indecent things to little sisters. It was really fun. You got a problem with that? And then Kyosuke's father struck him in the face and sent him to the floor. Deserved. And yet Kyosuke still pleads that it's his game, so his dad can't throw it out. He's in high school, so an adult game is fine. Besides, his mother has even found his porn collection and said it's okay. He even says he loves eroge and wouldn't be himself without them. His father all but disowns him, but admits defeat. His worthless son can do what he wants, and Kyosuke protected every single piece of his sister's collection. The anime displays this tactic in the adventure game style, where he had a few options to pick between and he chose the one he figured would have the best outcome while in a panic. It is a good way to display how he actually considers his decisions now, especially since they can't be as heavy on internal monologue as the light novel. However, I prefer that the light novel makes it clear that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, but rather something he had already planned and made up his mind about if all else should fail. The next morning, he goes to school with Manami as usual. He introduces himself to the reader again, saying this is how he wants to spend every day and that he's an exceedingly normal high school student. But lately, he's begun to think there are some good points in living in an extraordinary and dangerous life too. It's fun, noisy, and sometimes embarrassing. He now understands Kirino better, but doesn't imagine their relationship will change. They still hate each other, and this morning she ignored him like usual. Life isn't like a game, and his affection points don't soar just because he helped her. But he didn't do it for her anyway. Repeating Sayori from before, he just did what he wanted to do. The only compensation is his satisfaction in himself. Manami, who has been ignored for his entire internal monologue, still praises him for probably having worked hard, even if he won't tell her anything. Finally, after school, he comes home and we repeat the opening scene of the book. He says he's home, but Kirino doesn't even glance his way. She's on her phone, giggling about something. He knows that her smile is cute, but will likely never be directed at him. Then the scene shifts slightly from the original one, as she's clearly talking about otaku stuff with Kuroneko. Kyosuke thinks to himself that she seems to be doing well, and so has no need for his life advice sessions anymore. He pours himself a drink, just like before, and leaves the room. But this time she stops him. She says she still needs life advice, but also, and then she looks him in the eyes and gives him an awkward smile, thanking him and calling him Aniki for the very first time in this novel. Then she turned away blushing, as Kyosuke is left thinking there's no way his little sister can be so cute.
俺の妹がこんなに可愛いわけがない
Oh, that's why they call it that.
As far as unambiguous flaws go, there are very few. There is a consistent trend of somewhat unlikely coincidences happening throughout the entire series. They are always purposeful, but might stretch a reader's suspension of disbelief. Though so far there's nothing serious, as there's only a few and they're mostly minor. Otaku Girls Unite has a meetup very close to Kirino finding them, which is lucky, but only saves us some time. Kirino has a photo shoot in the park when Kyosuke visits, which is an inconsequential coincidence. And finally, Kyosuke manages to find Kirino surprisingly easy at the end despite having no clue where she'd be. I'm not really complaining yet, but if I'm to establish a pattern for the whole series, I have to start right away. They do get kinda silly eventually. Besides, Kirino dropping the DVD in front of her dad is something that could have been a major coincidence, but was given sufficient motivation to make it only a matter of time. Tsukasa Fushimi also makes sure not to waste a single detail he spent lines setting up, so while the autographed postcard that caused the incidents is itself of no particular note, both it and the fictional voice actress Hoshino Kurara will come up again in future volumes. There are also some implications that seemingly contradict future continuity. Kirino has trophies and awards going back to kindergarten, but it will be confirmed that she was not good at running back then. So either those trophies are unrelated to all the running ones, or it's just a very tiny plot hole. Kyosuke also says he's talked to his sister more this month than in the past decade, which is just incorrect as future volumes will reveal they were close up until some years ago. However, that is mitigated by the fact Kyosuke is an unreliable narrator who is prone to hyperbole, is very conflicted and confused about his feelings for Kirino, and there are also many signs that point to him having forgotten or even repressed a lot of his past. How else would he have only a vague feeling that he and Kirino used to get along? Kirino is also seen hanging out with friends who are different from the named ones introduced next volume, who are pretty much the only ones we'll see for the rest of the series. We know this because Kyosuke sees them and thinks they aren't his type, which completely rules out the possibility of Ayase being among them. It's not really a flaw, it's just weird that Kirino's many nameless friends just stop showing up in the story. But that's it for nitpicky flaws, so what about the characters? It is hammered home repeatedly throughout the story that Kyosuke strives to be as mundane as possible. More than just normal, he is apathetic and prone to inaction until doing nothing would become inconvenient for him. He doesn't like risks or change, he lacks any hobbies as well as motivation to push himself, and he only really helps others when it's more convenient than doing nothing. He doesn't care for Kirino's hobby at first, he just helps her so that she can leave him alone. At least that's the excuse he gives us. His father considers him useless and clearly only cares about Kirino, considering Kyosuke is absent from all the photos. His mother makes fun of him in degrading ways throughout the story. She assumes he's reading porn in the entryway when he's almost caught with a mirror DVD. She dismisses even his middling academic achievements as all being because of Manami's tutoring. She has no respect for his privacy and barges into his room unannounced. She speaks like it's obvious their neighbors could only be praising Kirino and never him, and when Kirino is caught with the eroge, she immediately assumes it's his fault. From what we see, all of that is fairly justified, so Kirino is clearly not an outlier in seeing him as trash. The one person who openly and genuinely cares for him is his childhood friend Manami, but he takes her for granted. He ignores all of her advances, even though she can't make it any clearer that she's in love with him. He teases her with insults, calling her a grandma and saying she acts like a mother until she gets upset, and only then does he throw her a bone just so she won't pout or nag him. And even then, all he does to cheer her up is just talk about his problems in response to her being nosy. The only thing he does for her this volume is buy her a can of tea during their park date, and he only went on that so he could relax after a tiring day at the off-kai. And during the date, he of course teased her a lot more. Despite being thoroughly established as useless, selfish and apathetic, Kirino awakens something in him, which motivates him to push himself and take risks for her. Not only that, but he does it entirely for his own sake, and has no hard feelings when he believes Kirino has gone back to hating him despite all he did for her. As the novel itself lampshaded, it's fairly basic so far, with an intentionally normal dude that many could relate to who is pushed to grow into being a better person throughout the story. But there are still hints that there are more things going on under the surface, like how vague his memories are of the past few years, and how it's implied he and Kirino used to get along. Speaking of which, his feelings towards Kirino are complicated. He insists throughout the book that he hates her and emphasizes her every negative trait, of which there are many, at least in how she is towards him. But every time she's vulnerable or hurt, he can't keep up that facade. It's also very clear that he's lying to himself about his feelings for her. At the dinner table, he thought to himself that other people's hobbies are none of his concern, but when Kirino asked if he thinks she's strange for liking otaku stuff, He repeats the sentiment out loud while just telling himself he's only saying it so she'll leave him alone. Both when she's about to leave his room with the DVD and later during their first life advice. Despite saying he doesn't care for her, he tries to help her twice before she ever asks him to. Both by trying to help her pick up the stuff she dropped when he bumped into her at the start of the book, and then again by showing mercy on her by returning the DVD in a way where she doesn't have to admit it's hers. Of course, there's more after their first life advice, but at that point you can argue it's an extension of how he promised to help, so the early unprompted attempts are much better at showing his true colors. I think it's very telling that the start of the book has him note how her smile will never be directed towards him, implying that's something he would wish for. Later, he thinks back to how he's sure the relationship wasn't always this bad. He's frustrated to find out how little he knows about his sister when her modeling career is revealed to him. When it looks like she might make friends, he's happy for her, and when that ends up in failure, he's more patient with her than he's ever been before. The guy clearly cares a lot and wishes they were closer, even if he could never admit it even to himself. Even if she smiles at him, like when she's gushing over her hobby, that's not enough since it's not for him he's smiling. At the start of the book, his monologue describes her impassionately as being pretty and refined, only conceding that her smile is cute. However, as the book progresses, he will think of her as cute more and more often. There are early examples of him calling her cute, but mostly regarding her outfit, such as when she's dumbfounded in the hallway before dinner and he's done describing her fashion and how well she pulls it off. This happens several other times, both by him and other characters. There are a few more times in Akihabara while referring to her outfit, first as a setup of how it will make her stand out, and then again as it happens. Manami calls her cute both times she sees her, and the mother also calls her cute, but mostly just to say that she takes off to herself. It's a little bit impersonal. However, he slowly starts seeing her real cute side and will react to it more and more. Once when her facade breaks down during the life advice in chapter 1, and he notes that this cute little sister is definitely not the Kirino he knows. Then at Akihabara, he smiles at Kirino's cuteness whenever she shows off her younger and more childish side. Then again at the cafe after she ran away from home, he uses it very casually both initially and again for emphasis after she removes her makeup. So while he technically calls her cute consistently throughout, it shifts from mere appearance of her entire getup to how she personally acts and looks cute even without that. But his growth isn't only in rekindling the affection he has for his sister, but that he's starting to consider his words and actions more carefully. At the start, he frequently justifies his words by wanting to minimize trouble for himself. Just get Kirino out of his hair. But as he plays the game he borrowed, he starts seeing his life as having those decision points and considers his sister's affection points for him. Immediately when hearing of the concept, he wonders what Kirino's affection points for him are, and if he could have unlocked any special events with her if his points weren't so low. When telling her what he liked about the game, he suspects she'd kill him if his affection points with her sunk any lower, so he says what he can to best please her. When he runs out of the house to find Kirino, he compares himself to the protagonist looking for Shiori, with the only exception being that his affection points were deep in the negatives. That's part of why he's okay with Kirino initially not showing more affection for him after what he did. His points had gone up, sure, but obviously not enough to make up for years of negatives. One could also say that it's this more conscious attitude that pushes him to do something fun with Manami. However, we really don't see enough of their relationship to know if this is out of the ordinary, nor is this something particularly selfless. So interpret it however you'd like, I guess. Kirino is in some ways a stark contrast to Kyosuke. She's ambitious and an overachiever, very high grades, an excellent runner who wins races, a fashion model who makes a lot of money, and one of the most popular kids in school. And still, she finds time to devote to anime and games. In that sense, it's understandable how they live in completely different worlds and why she would look down on her useless, apathetic brother just like the rest of the family does. But she has no choice but to turn to him for help, and we see how she falls apart completely when there seems to be no path forward. In other ways, she and Kyosuke mirror each other. Her feelings for him appear to be just as complicated as his are for her. During their first life advice, she's horrible to him, only treating him well when he praises her or she can talk about her hobby. Even then, she feigned being standoffish at times, even if she was clearly quite happy. Since Kyosuke has not yet been in need of her help, we can't say how she'd react if the roles were reversed. Still, we see how she treats him horribly and is described to look at him like he's garbage. And yet, she comes to him for help and eagerly wants to hear what he thinks of the game she lent him. She won't admit such weakness though, just like she wouldn't admit that she's lonely when pressed. She's stubborn, but then again, so is her brother as we saw at the end, and they probably both got it from their dad. While Kyosuke was written to be bland and relatable with room for growth, Kiruno is right now the main hook designed to hold the reader's interest. For this reason, she's designed to be very appealing but hostile specifically towards the main characters. There's a clear obstacle to overcome. We see frequent moments of vulnerability where she reveals just how endearing she can be, giving the reader a clear goal they hope Kyosuke can reach. She gets so into her anime and games that it's hard to not be swept up in her enthusiasm, and she shrinks completely when worrying about being seen as weird due to her hobby, or when she thinks Kyosuke might make fun of her, which makes you feel protective over her. At all other times, when things are going well, her guard is up and she's confident and aggressive. Or, in otaku terms, she's a typical tsundere archetype. The huge divide between her cute, vulnerable side and her nonchalant, hostile side is what's known as gap moe. The contrast itself is what makes her appealing, and these tropes are so common because they work. Of course, common archetypes and tropes are very useful tools for getting the job done, but to truly stand out you need further characterization. While Volume 1 is just the tip of the iceberg, as can be expected, they still manage to give her depth. She doesn't just drop her hostile attitude when looking to her brother for help, but also when she gets excited to talk about her hobby. In a sense, showing how much she cares is another type of vulnerability that she isn't willing to show to many. She even unwittingly smiles at Kyosuke while talking about her games. Despite her being incredibly good at practically every single thing she's ever done, taking one step into the unfamiliar otaku world makes those skills useless, and so she becomes a helpless outsider that hardly anyone wants to speak to. In fact, she has a tendency to freeze up and then run away when facing obstacles she doesn't know how to deal with. She reacts with hostility to Kyosuke's offer to help gather her things, which we now know is because of the DVD she didn't want him to see. She freezes up in the hallway before dinner, likely panicking that she can't find it. She freezes up and leaves the dinner table when her hobby is being mocked by her father. She freezes up when Kyosuke corners her to where she practically has no option but to admit the Meru DVD is hers. She freezes up and requires constant pushes from Kyosuke to join Otaku Girls Unite. She couldn't do anything to make friends and just takes her frustration out on Kyosuke. And she couldn't do anything against her dad, making her resort to throwing an ashtray at him. And then there are the hints to what we just don't know about her yet. There are hints that she and Kyosuke used to be closer, and Kyosuke don't seem to remember what happened or when, but maybe she does. While Kyosuke's POV shows how she can be rude and dismissive to him, it ignores how he treats her very similarly. That mirroring makes it equally possible that either one of them is responsible for the divide. Add to that how she claims to not know why she likes little sister so much or when it started. Her embarrassment implies she knows more than she's willing to say, and not remembering when it started would put her memory on par with Kyosuke, so it's certainly suspicious. Especially when the story plants ideas in the reader's head by giving them suggestive scenes between the siblings, like Kiruno crawling into Kyosuke's bed at night for the life advice, or how she crawls towards him on all fours while maintaining eye contact after he asked why she likes little sister games. There's definitely something more between them, likely a complicated past that we have just not yet glimpsed. It's an incredibly solid foundation that will be built on for another 11 volumes. The final character of the trio that's arguably the most relevant to this volume is Manami, who is the real opposite of Kiruno and serves as a good contrast. At the start of the book, Kyosuke is entirely aligned with her, wants to be normal like her, and wants to go to the same school as her. He doesn't feel for her romantically, but feels safe in her presence as she's an aspect of his life that will never change. That said, while she's symbolically important as an opposing pole to Kiruno, she hasn't really done much yet. She's inquired into Kyosuke's life, given some mild advice, and praised him when he does good. That's about it. Almost like the insulting description of supporting actress might be the most apt way to describe her, at least for now. However, a small detail that I don't think should be overlooked is how Kyosuke and Manami affect each other. She's briefly jealous of younger, cuter girls, but Kyosuke encourages her to make no effort to change since she's fine the way she is. Even though her being that way is why he doesn't have romantic feelings for her. When she and Kyosuke spots Kirino's photoshoot, I interpret her lines as trying to cheer Kyosuke up by telling him not to compare himself to her. She is amazing and he is normal like Manami herself. They are encouraging each other to be normal and not to change. If this normalcy is why Kirino seemingly hates Kyosuke, no wonder she hates Manami who encourages it. That and perhaps some other unknown reason, considering she sees her and Kyosuke as being lovey-dovey with each other. Speaking of which, if we view Kirino and Manami as opposing forces pulling Kyosuke towards either an exciting lively life or a normal and calm life, then they are naturally set up to be in opposition with each other at some point. Manami being in love with Kyosuke is not really a hurdle now, but since every reader expects some manner of romantic feelings to bloom between him and Kirino, that could lead to a very difficult love triangle which would again put Kirino and Manami in opposition. Then there are the otaku friends. Shiori and Kuroneko are amazing characters too, there just isn't much material for them in this volume. They serve mostly as mirrors to Kyosuke and Kirino for now. All we know about Shiori is that she's normally more reserved, but created a character for herself so she could fill in the role that she needed for the group. Both that and then going out of her way to make sure Kirino and Kuroneko made friends were things she did entirely for herself and not for any external praise. Even though Kyosuke thinks he would never do that for someone, he ends up doing something similar for Kirino for the exact same reason. How fitting that he called Shiori a good person for it, and she deflected by saying it means he himself is probably a good person, just projecting it onto her. As for Kuroneko, she's just as abrasive as Kirino and in her own way just as much of an outsider. While Kirino belongs to a different world, Kuroneko seems to belong a little bit too much to this one, considering her cosplay and how derisive she is of anything outside what she herself is into. She comes off as elitist, describing fans of Meruru as idiot kids or adults who are satisfied as long as there's moe in it. It also doesn't help that the anime they like couldn't be further apart, a pink moe magical girl anime and a dark edgy action anime. Shiori, however, sees through their argument and can tell they are becoming friends, which the ending phone call proves without a doubt. In fact, Shiori seems pretty good at reading people. A major theme this volume is how there are multiple sides to a person that makes them who they are. It's stated very explicitly so that there's no way a reader can miss it, because in later volumes the concept will come up again in more subtle ways. Kirino isn't some popular overachiever at school who just happens to watch anime sometimes, and she's also not an otaku who just pretends to be a normal kid when she goes to school. She's both, and the only deception is out of necessity because of prejudice. When she went to the off-guy, she didn't make any effort to hide her other self. These were the people she thought would accept her no matter what, and yet they rejected her completely because she stood out like a wolf among sheep. Every girl there probably knows children like Kirino who would bully them for being otaku, much like Kirino might be if her classmates found out. She only overcame that thanks to Shiori, who is not only great at reading people, but herself admits to having a second side to her. She admits her entire otaku persona is a character she created to best lead the group, so if anyone would understand Kirino, of course it would be her. What that other side to her is will remain a mystery for now, and the only clue we get is how she acts like a posh lady over text chat. Another related theme might best be described as how people live in different worlds. This is explicitly mentioned in the story too, but only in reference to how amazing and popular people like Kirino, her model colleagues and her friends from school are so different from Manami and Kyosuke. However, the principle can also be applied to the different world that is the otaku subculture. Kyosuke starts out not knowing anything about that world and only having prejudice against it, but through the story he learns more and more about it. In fact, the reader is almost expected to know nothing about it either and is thus led on the same journey as him. Kirino explains how her adventure games work in such detail that it could serve as a tutorial for the reader checking out such a game himself. She gushes over her entire collection, talks about which games are ports from other consoles, what bonus material is included in the deluxe editions, and how some games might be more challenging for beginners than others. She explains how all ages versions of Eroge are practically different games. Because there are limitations on the writers in the All Ages version, the writing often ends up feeling unsatisfying, but the All Ages version often compensates by adding new content like additional routes. She says it's an insult to the fans and writers to claim it's the same game with just the porn removed. They go to Akihabara, and Kirino points out all the landmarks you might want to check out yourself if you ever get the chance to visit. Radio Kaikan, Gamer's flagship store and Chosen Book Tower for now, but there's more to come. They learn to navigate social media to find like-minded people and to make friends, even mentioning how it might be scary or possibly risky for Kirino to list her real age while seeking friends in a very male-dominated hobby. If not for Otaku Girls Unite, she'd most likely end up only meeting boys older than her, possibly even adults. Kyosuke has a culture shock at a maid cafe, embarrassing himself so that you hopefully won't do the same if you ever visit one. The experience is detailed enough that you'd understand how they work if you go yourself. Though, someone will have to confirm for me how common it is for maid cafes to lie about their food being homemade while serving curry out of a can. Maybe it's just Pretty Garden Cafe being shit. We see that there are all kinds of otaku, from regular plain girls to closet otaku like Kirino, all-out otaku like Sayori, and intensive cosplayers like Kuroneko, but that their shared hobby can draw them together. Even the most clashing personalities will still have some common ground like Kirino and Kuroneko. Kyosuke comes to understand this different world so well that he can then return to his father in the cave, still stuck at Kyosuke's own starting point of staring at shadows on the wall, believing what the TV tells him, and somehow change his mind. We see this entire journey. At first, he's freaking out over the Meru DVD, then he thinks Kuroneko and Kirino are getting too worked up when it's just anime they're arguing over, and finally he confronts his father, defends the hobby, and fully accepts all the shame that comes with it. Even if he doesn't fully understand it himself, considering he still did ask Kirino if throwing away her collection was an option, he has come to accept that world as not being so weird as he once thought. I think this, rather than the sibling incest rom-com, is where Tsukasa Fushimi's real passion lie when writing the story. Because as much as Kirino and Kyosuke's relationship has been fleshed out during the novel, the meat of the text still seems to focus on educating the reader on otaku culture. Maybe it's clicking for you why I opened this video talking about filters. Kyosuke and his father were both unfamiliar with otaku culture and thought it was weird, but Kyosuke was forced to learn and understand despite his initial reaction, allowing him to better mediate. On its own, it's not a groundbreaking development, but what stands out is the meta-narrative of how the reader is likely in a similar situation. I've known about the anime for years, but was never interested as I assumed I knew what it was based on name alone. Wanting some trashy light novel to read while passing the time while working on PC repairs, I picked it up and was shocked to discover it's a genuinely good story. And now I'm stuck on the other side of the filter trying to explain to people how the sitcom comedy is actually really good while they have the natural outsider perspective. That level of connection to the main character is what convinced me the series was worth covering in videos, and the story only got better from there. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a case of me saying the story is really good, oh if only you can push past the sitcom stuff. No, fuck that entire attitude. The inevitable relationship that's forming between Kyosuke and Kirino can't just be discarded. It is an important side of the story. Get rid of it and it wouldn't be Oreimo anymore, just a thinly veiled guidebook to 2008 otaku culture. If someone can't get past the premise, it's probably for the best that they don't, even if they're missing out on an incredible story. Everyone who can escape being filtered is rewarded greatly, so if you're still here and still feel put off by the premise, best advice I can give is to learn from Kyosuke and give this strange foreign world a chance and try to embrace all sides of it. And please, read the light novel. The anime butchers every single character except Kuroneko, so now nearly the entire community agrees there's no other candidate for best girl. Even though it's very obviously...